And I'm going to start with a couple of points, some questions that came up in the break and a story that I want to tell you about. Probably most of you all remember on the news, I think it was about 3 years ago now, a little girl that was outside of Richmond in Chesterfield County, a little 7-year-old who was known to have peanut allergy, who inadvertently got a peanut on the playground. No one knows exactly what happened. She did have an allergic reaction. She went on into the school nurse's office, and I'm not clear of the details, whether there was a nurse there or an aide there or whatever happened, but unfortunately there was no epinephrine at that time in that office with her name on it. And the person that was there in the office did not feel comfortable with going on and giving someone else's epinephrine to her. And as a result of that reaction, the little girl passed away. And as tragic as certainly that event was, some really good things came from it. And one of them is our state law that is now in effect for public schools that allows them to have what we call stock epinephrine. And so, and our lovely school nurses who are part of our discussion and panel a little bit later tonight too are going to talk a little bit more about action plans and epinephrine. But they have the luxury, and I will call it a luxury, of having epinephrine that somebody's got to pay for, and sometimes it's their school district that pays for it, and sometimes it's the pharmaceutical industry that has paid for it. But they do have the luxury of having epinephrine at their school that doesn't have anybody's name on it, so that if a child has their very first anaphylactic reaction at school, that medicine is available. Or if a child needs a second dose and for whatever reason they don't have a second dose available, that medicine is available. We have noticed in our area that, and probably you all, as those of you that are in independent schools, know that we don't have that same opportunity. We may not have an order that's even written that allows us to have epinephrine, and certainly getting stock epinephrine has been a challenge. So in your folder packets, that's why I have included an example of the standing order so that you can take that and tailor make it for your school, and then get a physician or myself if you need to sign that order that allows you to have epinephrine there. You could use in an emergency. And then I referenced again some of the coupons that are available that will allow you to get it for free through the program through Mylan, if you want to get epinephrine for your school for free, and that would be the stock epinephrine that would be available there, so you'd have it just in case. And as you remember, epinephrine expires in 12 months, so that's something that you'll have to renew every year. And just as a side note, if you're going to want me to sign those orders and take care of them, don't ask me the day before school. Try and get those taken care of early, because I have about 5,000 school forms that are always due on the first day of school also. So get those cards and letters early to me. So what I'd like to do now, so hopefully that clarified some of the questions, and if you have more, be sure and ask me at the end too. So what I'd like to do now is introduce Dr. Liz Koman, who is a PhD, and she's also the president of our FASGOT, and she's also the president of Food Allergy Associates. And she has a lot of frontline experience on helping manage the environment, the school setting, and she has a lot of tips of things that you can take back to your school that you can apply that will help keep kids safe while they're at school. And then she's going to spend a couple minutes talking about some of the psychological aspects that the family and student undergo when they're going to go to school with food allergies. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Liz Koman.
So hopefully, can we hear? Okay. Hopefully everyone is still awake and the cookies and coffee helped. But as Dr. Hogan said, let's see here. There we go. We've learned what food allergy is. We've learned how to treat a food allergy emergency. And now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the impacts that having a food allergy diagnosis for the individual as well as the family can have, and then also some steps you can take to manage food allergies in your schools. Oh, I already changed it. So there's been a lot of research recently on the quality of life impact of a food allergy diagnosis. And I think the research that came back even surprised the people who deal with food allergies on a regular basis. It's been found to be, have more of an impact than diabetes, arthritis, all kinds of different ailments, because it doesn't just affect one aspect of an individual's life. It's more than just the food. And we think, oh, well, it's just food, they can't eat food. But there's so many more aspects that are involved with it. And in fact, affects family relationships, the finances, which we already discussed, a lot of social interactions, major impact for the school environment. It has a marital impact on the parents of trying to raise a food allergic child and trying to keep that child safe. And these impacts have found to be a lot more significant, a lot stronger, a lot worse. If you've had a child who's had to go to the emergency department or the emergency room within the past year, or you have a child who has multiple food allergies, or if you're dealing with a child or managing a child's food allergies who have a milk or wheat allergy. Have to throw in a little bit of a humor-ish slide here. So often when we think the social impact, I wanted to bring this up because I'm sure you guys have all experienced some frantic parent and you're thinking, okay, what's going on? Why are they so adamant that we have to have these conversations? Or you've had the opposite of parents saying, why on earth do we have to deal with this? Why, peanut butter isn't poison or the yogurt isn't poison. Why do we have to ban it? And there is an impact on everybody, really. But people think, okay, well, they're just overreacting. But to the food allergic family who's saying my child really didn't have a choice in this matter and it truly can be a deadly situation, your child can live without that allergen product, often create some social interaction issues and probably some conflicts and things that you've had to mitigate or negotiate in the school setting. So at school, sorry, I can't read to the side here. Clearly I need better glasses. Caregivers of children express the greatest concern when it comes to the school setting. When you have the child with you, you can help control the environment. You send them off to school and you really are trusting and putting all of your faith and trust into somebody else. And we know our teachers and we know our school systems are doing a great job and they're really trying their best. And 90% of schools are reporting that they do have food allergic children enrolled. But that's a lot of kids, a lot of food allergic kids in school, and 1 out of 4 kids have their first reaction at school. So if they're enrolling that many food allergic kids, there's also some that may not have had a reaction. So again, back to that stock epi that Dr. Hogan was mentioning, there could be people who are enrolled who don't even know they have food allergies yet. And of all of those children who are enrolled, 1 out of 6 of them will have an allergic reaction when they are in school. So given the number that you have, chances are you'll most likely be dealing with some type of allergic emergency at some point. Some of the dangers of food allergies at school. 3 out of 4 school nurses have students at risk for severe allergic reaction who don't provide epinephrine to the school. That's a huge concern for the school. Another component of that danger is that 1/3 of the schools out there haven't necessarily formalized policies and procedures yet for how to deal with an allergic emergency. So it occurs, even if they have epi, do the right people know what to do in the right situation, the timing, and lots of components that need to be planned out and navigated. If that isn't written down and people don't know that plan, that adds another risk layer there. Of the schools that did have policies, a good deal of them were missing components like emergency contact information or student health histories on file. And one of the biggest concerns I have found is that 32% of the time, school personnel didn't know how to recognize the signs and symptoms of an allergic reaction. If you can't recognize it, you can't treat it early, and it's been clearly shown tonight that we need to treat early. So we think again, back to the social aspects of what we mentioned. Food, okay, so if someone's going to have a reaction, they eat their food in the cafeteria or at lunchtime. What research has found, though, is that the majority of the reactions that are occurring at school are not happening in the cafeteria. Parents, if parents send their kids to school with their lunch, majority of the time that's probably a safe bet that there's safe food in there, one would hope. But half of the reactions are happening in the classroom. There's a lot of food in the classroom, a lot of art projects in the classroom, lots of risk for contamination and other issues that can happen there. Some were also occurring outside on the playground, after school activities, football practice, etc. So it's not not one place you have to manage it, not one place we have to think about, but it's the whole school environment, which goes back to that policies and procedures and having those in place and thinking about how we can make all of the environments and the entire school environment safe. So with this growing epidemic, and I apologize for rushing through the slides, I know we're a little behind time, so I'm kind of moving quick here, guys. The FDA recently did the Food Safety Modernization Act, and it was designed to improve food safety in the United States by shifting the focus from response to prevention. So with that in mind, the CDC has developed guidelines for managing food allergies. The guidelines are voluntary, and they very much in depth discuss steps and actions for personnel at all levels in the school system on how to manage food allergies. And given that most everyone these days are very busy professionals, and it's hard to find time to read a 100-page document and sift through what the key points are for you, we've done that and sort of highlighted some of those steps here just to make this, okay, what is it? How do I take all this amazing and wonderful information that was presented earlier, and how do we put it into action, and what do we need to do to make that a reality for our school? And what the CDC outlined in their guidelines, the essential steps, included having a coordinated approach, strong leadership, and specific and a comprehensive plan for managing the food allergies. So discussing each one a little bit more individually. The coordinated approach, it's not one person. To truly have the well-coordinated approach, it really is all three components. So the school knows your environment, you know your system, you know what's going to work there, and you have certain things that you need to make sure are in place for policies and procedures. The allergist, that is the child's allergist, clearly knows allergies and what that child is capable of, where their history is, what recommendations are best for that child. And the parent of the food allergic child also knows the child's situation, some of their tendencies, and maybe their maturity level. So a good example of how this truly is important is, at what point do you allow a child to self-carry? There's not a magic threshold number. It really should be a conversation between the parent and the allergist, and even talking to the school. At what point do they self-carry? How do we manage epi? There's a lot of reasons why this would be important, but that I think is a good example that highlights that coordination that needs to occur. The second main component that the CDC recommends is strong leadership. And this isn't in just saying, yes, we want to invite food allergic children into our school. That's not quite the depth of it. It really is, you need to have the top-down support. There should be a single person in the school system who says, I am going to coordinate the management of food allergies. They're going to oversee the policies, they're going to work for the training of the staff, ensure that training occurs on a regular basis for the staff. When families call and they have questions about how do you do this at your school, how do we handle field trips, how do all these different things that they want to know to ensure their child stays safe, having one point of contact for them to answer those questions and get a hold of is a great approach. And that clear leadership also entails training staff regularly. And I'm going to mention that quite a few times in my slide, which means I'm really driving that point home, is training that staff regularly, especially on those signs and symptoms. With over 30% of staff not recognizing that, ensuring that they see what those signs and symptoms are, and they are aware of how you want in your school system food allergies to be managed is absolutely key. The third main component that the CDC recommends is having a comprehensive plan. That would include, the comprehensive plan includes quite a few things, and I've provided some checklists here to kind of help boil it down because it really encompasses so many aspects. But that would really mainly include all the strategies and actions needed to manage the food allergies in the school. That's a huge, huge statement. But along with that, you want to make sure that you're meeting legal requirements and that you also are adaptable and you upgrade the plan. You might have a wonderful plan now and some research might come out and things might change, some laws might change. In Virginia especially, but even nationwide, we're really in a time where numerous food allergic laws have been coming out in the past few years. So keeping up and reviewing your plans regularly is a good practice. So some specifics to include in that plan. The plan should address the daily management of food allergic children. So it could be what happens in the school, what happens when they go to Spanish class or PE class or art class, or they have baseball practice after school. Daily management. It also should include things like field trips and trips out to lunch for restaurants. Some schools do things like that. It can't just be one component. It really needs to be the whole aspect of the management. The plan also needs to account for food allergic emergencies. If there's one teacher in the classroom, or if there's two, who's going to call, who gets the medication, who's going to ride with the child as they're transported for further evaluation. Just the general plan. And once the staff knows the plan, it's a lot easier. In an emergency, we all know that if we have a plan and an emergency happens, people can at least try to follow that plan. If there's no plan in place, it's not the time to try to coordinate when an emergency is occurring. Excuse me. If someone who has pollen allergies, this is not the time to get up and give a talk. I'm sorry. The third component is to provide professional development for your staff members. Again, I promise this will appear on a number of slides. And it is so important to educate both on the plan that you develop as well as the signs and symptoms of an allergic reaction. Another thing the CDC asked to have included in your plan is to educate children and family members of the non-allergic students in the school. And I thought this was a really nice addition and something that I hadn't seen in a lot of other, oh my goodness, I apologize, a lot of other literature. But that is going to help with the understanding, some of the social interactions that we discussed. Even bringing awareness helps bring down some of that hostility. Well, what do you mean? Who cares? Why can't we have our peanut butter? The kid's just going to have a rash. They're going to itch and they're going to be fine. They don't understand what that really can mean and what that can transpire. So that education and awareness and educating both the parents of the non-food allergic children as well as the food allergic children to help with the bullying issues and acceptance and just normalcy of incorporating food allergic children is key. And then the fifth part is to create and maintain a healthy and safe educational environment. So how do we make all these things happen? This is, I think, wonderful information, but under each one of those, I could probably have, a 3-page checklist of things. So I tried to develop some checklists so that as you are working on your plans for your school, you can at least go through, and some of these might apply to you, some of them might not, but at least it's something to think about and go, do we need to do this? Have we incorporated this? Things to consider at least. And we've grouped these according to different areas so that you can kind of see how they're clustered and help stay organized. I'm a list kind of person. I have to organize them. So for your policies, would you like to consider having an initial meeting with the family? Although some families, we hear lots of stories of parents of food allergic kids showing up to school saying, here's the kids' EpiPens, see ya. Okay, well, that's not necessarily the case at all. Some parents are going to want to meet and say, okay, how is this going to be handled so they have a comfort level? I want to explain this child and their history so the teacher can be aware. So that's just something to consider. You need to consider the cafeteria management. There's differences if you provide food, if the kids just bring snack, but there's a whole bunch of things that need to be considered on how that's going to occur, as well as cleaning of the space. And with the cafeteria management also includes a safe eating space. There's lots of discussion. Some families really would like to have a separate eating area, some would not. Some children might require it, some might not. There's actually currently a lawsuit going on right now with a school. Parents pulled the child out of school because the school said, well, we gave them a safe place to eat. Well, they put a desk alone in the corner, so the kid ate alone every day. That's not okay. So things like this need to be considered. And it could be that, okay, we're going to have a whole, I'm saying nuts because we use peanut, but it could be whatever the child's allergy is, nut-free table. And, okay, Susie, Mary, John, you all didn't have nuts in your lunch today. You get to eat with Sammy today, who's at the nut-free table. So at least there's other people there as well. There's lots of ways to work around this, but isolating a food allergic child is not one of them. With the policies, something that really needs to be considered, and this speaks with the leadership as well, how is the policy communicated to the staff? One thing that I like to recommend is the back to school. You're coming back to school, there's usually a staff meeting first week, at least first day. Let's talk about food allergies. Even if the first time you have a nice in-depth training, and after that, if you have consistent staff, it's a quick review of signs and symptoms, and here's our policies, don't forget. It's going to help keep that consistency and that knowledge fresh in all of the staff. Again, we've talked about some of the education for the non-food allergic kids, some daily management you want to consider, and bullying. Bullying is a really big topic right now, and the literature is, as a parent of a food allergic child, it's very disturbing to me when I read it, but there is significant amount of bullying occurring with food allergic children. And if you don't have a bullying policy, I would highly recommend incorporating one, and I think food allergies should be part of that bullying policy. If that is something that your school is struggling with, I do know a school here who's in attendance, Chesapeake Montessori School, has an excellent bullying policy, and it does deal with food allergies as well. I spoke with them, and they said they'd be happy to talk to anyone about that. And again, the food allergy policy should deal with the emergency management and all the components that go along with managing a food allergic emergency. Moving on to some of the requirements. Different schools have different thoughts about this. Individual action plans. Is that something that your school should require? Student A comes in with a food allergy. Okay, I want an action plan signed by their allergist that says these are the steps that should be taken. This is when epi should be administered for this child. Personally, I think it's a really good idea. If the child is noted as having a food allergy, they should come with an action plan signed by their physician, so you know exactly how that child should be treated in an emergency. Other things to consider: stock epi at school, requiring emergency medicine for your food allergic children, especially if you're a private school. It seems something you might be able to require if the physician says that it's necessary. Keeping your epi readily available and accessible, and travel on field trips. If you are planning a field trip that is not accommodating to the food allergic kids, it needs to either be adjusted or something needs to occur so that they can be included. We can't say, oh, well, I'm sorry, we want to go to, the milk factory or the nut factory, and well, you just can't come. So there's something else needs to be adjusted, and the field trips need to be thought about as well as taking their medicine with them on that. So the next ones will go a little quicker here. Food handlers, if you have people at the school who are handling food, some best practices that are out there and things to possibly consider implementing, or how if they would work for your particular situation, is maintaining a list of the food allergic kids, so the people in the cafeteria or the food handlers know, oh, this child's coming, that child should hopefully self-identify, is this food safe for me? But if not, at least they're aware too, so they can, it's an extra set of precautions there. Reading the labels on food, preparing the food allergic kids' meals first so that there's less risk of cross-contamination. They can put saran on it, put it in a separate location. And probably one of the biggest things is that food handlers really need to complete food allergy training. There is ServSafe, is a national organization, and most food handlers, every restaurant manager has to be trained in ServSafe. They now have a food allergy training module as well. It's very cheap, it's very informative, and there's also places online for, it's $10. That is it. And there's 2 states in the US that require it, that food handlers can go on there and for $10 learn about food allergies and help reduce the risk of cross-contact and cross-contamination in the kitchen. Things to consider for the classroom. How are the food allergic kids identified? Are you going to allow food in the classroom? Some people some school districts, some schools are advocating no food in the classroom, that it's only eaten outside of the classroom. Parties in the classroom don't have to revolve around food, or it could be that you're studying a certain country, you're studying South America this month. Okay, so we're going to have a South America cuisine and taste it one day. That might be a special situation, but on a daily basis, we don't need cupcakes or cookies every single day brought into the classroom. The cleaning protocol that needs to be considered if there is food. How are you going to clean the surfaces in the desks? And again, this goes back to ensuring inclusion in activities. We don't want the food allergic child to be excluded from activities. And check for hidden allergens. I love this next slide. So there are hidden allergens in so many places. We always think food, but the younger the child, the more the food tends to spread and appear in lots of unintentional and unthought of places. But there's also a lot of physical locations where food allergens can be. I mean, things from Soaps and lotions, especially, we all like these fancy lotions now, or these fancy soaps that have almonds or milk or lots of soy. Craft projects, egg noodles, wheat and Play-Doh. Things can truly be in lots of locations. So again, it's not just, oh, I want to give the class treats today. There's lots of other areas that really need to be thought about and looked about. Snacks, pet food. Lots of pet food has allergens in it. Even some of the pet bedding does. One of our last checklists here, some additional things to think about as you're working on your food allergic management plans is the education. And this goes back to educating the faculty and staff on the food allergy basics annually. The learning literature shows that you train someone on something that they don't know very much or aren't overly familiar with, they don't really use it and their knowledge declines pretty rapidly, and after about 6 months they might remember a little bit, but they sure aren't going to have the same level of expertise and knowledge or familiarity with it as they did for their initial training. Hopefully, given the school year is a 9-month period and they're thinking about this regularly, hopefully that knowledge transfers. But again, that kind of brings up the point. Annual refresher training and a minimum of the signs and symptoms in the emergency protocol. Training new hires, consider new employee orientation to be part of this and include your food allergy training. And something to really also think about is substitute teachers. How are kids identified as substitute teachers? Do they know how to manage things when they come into a classroom? Bus drivers, after-school activity teachers. You might have the best teacher in the world, but are they in there all the time? Do the kids go to another teacher for another subject, or does another subject teacher come into the classroom? And planning for an emergency. There's obviously lots that was covered today about planning for an emergency, but some things to make sure you think about as you're writing your plans is never leaving a child alone who's experiencing allergic reaction. Even if it's you've got 4 hives or you're really not feeling so well, go up in the front office and they're walking alone. That should never occur. If the teacher can't go, at least send a few kids with them to make sure that they get there. Identify the staff roles in an emergency. Ask for advanced life support on the ambulance when you're calling for EMS. And make sure that in an emergency, you're focused on the situation at hand. We're keeping the child safe, we're treating them, and we're getting them transported. And then a few days later, you can sit and troubleshoot going, how did this happen? How can we fix it? But worrying about how did this happen in the situation isn't important. It's treating the child and making sure they're safe, and then worrying about the situation afterwards. So, is your school prepared? We've talked about a lot of checklists and a lot of different things. So thinking about that and thinking about your current situation in your current school. Does your school maintain food allergy safety policy? Is there an effective communication system that informs everyone in your school how to manage an allergic emergency? Do you have any signs posted? Staff trained annually? And are food allergic students protected from the risks of an allergic reaction due to cross-contamination, prepared snacks, or hidden allergens? So there's a lot of things here, a lot of things to consider. But I always have to end a talk with a final reminder that food allergic children are normal children. They just have to avoid certain foods. And they absolutely can be included with a little bit of pre-planning.